The following program is sponsored by Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County and the generous gifts of these contributors.
Welcome to our 44th season of Mosaic. I'm your host, Susan Shulman Pertnoy. Mosaic is Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County's weekly news magazine, exploring the most critical issues facing Jews here and around the world. Research shows for the younger members of the community, celebrating religion does not mean as much as it once did. Many young Jews describe themselves as having no religion at all, and at the same time feel more alone and isolated. Now, a program built around the warm and familiar traditions of Shabbat dinners is looking to change all that. It's called OneTable, and it's the focus of today's episode of Mosaic. We'll be right back.
You have the power to do good that goes everywhere. From here to Israel to Ukraine to 70 countries around the world. From educational to life-changing experiences. From lonely to connected. From afraid to strong. But that good goes beyond our city. Your gift drives connections and awakens identity. From devastation to reimagination, from tragedy to support. Your gift transforms leaders from being a solo visionary into being a catalyst for change. And while you're watching this, your gift is making its way from North America to impacting people around the world.
Welcome back to Mosaic. Today, I am so thrilled to welcome a dynamic leader, a social entrepreneur, the co-founder and CEO of OneTable, Aliza Klein. Aliza, welcome to Mosaic.
Thank you, Susan.
It's so great to see you again and have you on the show.
That's really an honor.
I want to start with your background. How did your upbringing influence creating OneTable?
It's a great question, Susan. I think it actually had a very profound impact. So I am the daughter of an artist. My mom is a dancer, and my father is a rabbi and a Bible scholar. And I grew up in a small city in Colorado called Colorado Springs. And it was unusual to be Jewish in Colorado Springs. It was unusual to have a dancer as a mom and a rabbi as a dad. We were the only family with that setup. And because of that, my home became very much a gathering place, certainly for the Jewish community, anybody coming into town who was also Jewish, and also dancers from all over the country. And because of that, we got very used to hospitality. It was very clear what my role as the middle daughter was in terms of setting up and welcoming people. Like, we were just trained about hospitality early on. But on the Jewish side, my parents together really were into the idea of designing ritual. They took the base that they knew, all of the laws around kashrut and Shabbat, and then they really modified them to work for our family and to work for growing up in Colorado. So that meant, there were always fresh cut flowers and a beautiful set table, because for my mother, the aesthetic was incredibly important. But it also meant we needed to sing certain blessings and share the tunes that my father had grown up with. So it was really this kind of combination of all of those. And I just grew up thinking that that was quite normal. Normal to just take what's deep in our heritage, combine it with creative art, expression, and design, and then share that with others. That was just normative for me. It wasn't really until I grew up a little bit older and I learned that so many people had much more conventional Jewish backgrounds. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I just mean that people had inherited traditions, and that's how they lived their Jewish life. And my inherited tradition was creative design.
Wow, that's actually really fascinating. So how does OneTable connect younger generations to community and to each other?
Sure. So I'll just back up for 1 minute and explain what OneTable is. It works sort of like Airbnb for Shabbat dinner. That's the most basic way I would explain that. And what that means is there's a technology platform. You go to onetable.org, and there are hosts and there are guests. And the hosts have profiles, and they can open up and share their dinner. And then there are guests who come to find the dinners to attend. That's the basic feel of it. We are in 18 cities. We have a staff person like we do here in Palm Beach. And because it's a web-based platform, OneTable dinners have happened in about 600 cities across the country. So that's just a sense of kind of what it is. And the whole idea is that on every week there could be literally hundreds of Shabbat dinners, and no two should look or feel the same. They all reflect the individual host. And our individual hosts, as I mentioned, are in their 20s or 30s. So for many of them, this is the first time they're hosting a dinner, let alone a Shabbat dinner, let alone a Jewish event in their home, for their peers, for their friends, or for people they don't even know yet. So everything that we do, from our staff perspective, from our technology perspective, from our Jewish learning perspective, is to help those hosts feel confident and competent and ready to be warm and welcoming, because they are now becoming really hosts for the broader Jewish community.
Why is it so important for that connectivity? Why did you feel that need?
Yeah, so OneTable was founded because of two really alarming trends that were disproportionately affecting young adults. At the time, it was all millennials, which are the kids born 1981 to about 1996. And now there's also Generation Z, so mid-90s through already the mid-10s about. So our youngest participants are in their early 20s, right after graduating from college, and our oldest might be all the way up to their late 30s or early 40s. So it's now actually two different generations. And one is unfortunately just worse than the next in terms of these trends. The first is a rising disassociation from Jewish life, traditions, religion, and certainly institutions. That comes from the Pew study, right? 1 in 2, 50% of Jewish adults under 30 identify as Jews of no religion. What does that mean?
Sad.
It doesn't mean that they don't have pride or desire or connection, but it means they don't identify the same way their parents and grandparents did. And the second is an epidemic of loneliness, social isolation, addiction to technology. These were part of what it meant to grow up as a millennial, and certainly for the next generation even more so. These are meaning that young adults might experience the same levels of loneliness as an isolated senior. It's alarming, and that of course leads to anxiety, depression, all kind of the health issues that we are so familiar with. Of course, this has been exacerbated by the pandemic, both of these. So now the question comes, how do we make sure that we are not just helping people connect to Jewish tradition, but to each other? That's why hospitality is one of our core values. I want you to know how to welcome people warmly, begin a conversation, invite people into your actual home around your table, and form those strong ties. We just did a study of about 3,000 young adults. 2,000 of them are OneTable participants, current, active, former, and the other almost 1,000 are people who are not using OneTable yet. So we could compare the understanding of what does it mean to participate in one versus the other. So the good news is 75% are doing Shabbat who wouldn't otherwise. So check.
That's amazing.
We want to make sure that it's actually working. They're also through OneTable, through Shabbat actually being introduced to other Jewish expressions. So it's not limited to Shabbat. 45% of our hosts are now experimenting with other Jewish practices, whether it's Sukkot or Purim or Hanukkah or Passover. Or even thinking about how their own life cycle experiences like weddings or baby namings can be infused with Jewish wisdom. And then the third really important data point is about social and emotional connection. We used what's called a validated measure. So other researchers from UCLA had determined if you ask these 7 questions, you can find out how emotionally and socially lonely somebody is. They're not fun questions to answer. Their questions are like, I feel empty or rejected some of the time, most of the time. But these are questions that the young adults are not afraid to answer. They're really important to ask. Just asking them says, we care about you. Are you doing okay? And what we found is that the OneTable participants were 3 times less likely to report those levels of social and emotional loneliness.
So that connection is so critical.
It's so critical.
And it's through food, so no judgment. Just
Right.
It's just wonderful. That's a great way to take a break. We'll be right back after this brief message. OneTable is more than just a site to connect with the Jewish community. Its users are providing fascinating insights into what it means to be Jewish for our younger generations. We'll be right back with that and more on Mosaic.
30 seconds, you have to find a place to hide. If not, you're just in the open air, covering your head and hoping that nothing will happen. I tried to open the door into the house and I couldn't move it. The house was destroyed. The minute something like this happened, 48 hours later, you get a check for 4,000 shekels. The support is what keeps us strong, and the strength we get from all the organizations that are working with Jaffe, JFNA, ITC are important for our safety in Israel.
We're back talking with Aliza Klein, the co-founder of OneTable. Aliza, it started in 2014, and you've been in major cities, I think from Los Angeles to New York and even in Miami. Our federation is now supporting you here in Palm Beaches. What role are you taking here?
Sure, we are delighted actually, and I has to be said that the way in which we have been welcomed in by your federation has been extraordinary, and I hope that it actually will elevate the way we work with federations all over the country. No one has matched this level of hospitality. I am not exaggerating. I should not get in trouble by whoever might be watching this, but I'm going to back
love
this
up.
Okay.
Keep going.
All right. Here's what I mean. We have a funding partner actually based in Detroit, Michigan, the Fisher Foundation. They love the work that we were doing there. Many of their family members are moving here. And the question was, well, what would it look like for OneTable to actually help all these young people who are moving to this community, but to do it in a way that is integrated and really in partnership with the Jewish Federation? So that led to several conversations, joint conversations with Federation talented staff and fundraisers going with me to meetings with your community leaders and inviting them to help bring this here. That's an extraordinary type of collaboration and investment, and the Fisher Family Foundation is actually matching that.
Yes.
So it's helping us really grow our impact. We look at the changing map. 25% of young adults moved during the pandemic. That's an enormous number of people. In the Jewish community alone, that must mean that's at least 300,000 to 400,000 young adults. And we know from demographic trends that people are coming down here in very large numbers. So while we set up OneTable to go to 12 cities based on the cities that had at least 20,000 Jewish young adults, and that's how we grew, since the pandemic, we need to change that strategy to be much more nimble. So we're here. We will also have a presence in Boca for the first time. We have a young field manager named Nadav Davidson, who is terrific, and he will be really serving the community here as well as Boca, and he will just shuttle between the two because we know for young adults, in some cases, they're going to stay very local to where they are on a Friday night.
Yes.
And in some cases, they're excited to travel a little bit if it's something where they're going to meet other people who are like-minded. I'll tell you something funny that I learned when OneTable started, which was 22 to 26-year-olds really need to meet new people on a Friday night. It's extremely valuable real estate in their social calendar. It's an extension of college, so they might have a dinner with a few people, but then they'll go out afterward. Or they'll have more people kind of crammed into a home for dinner. As they get to 27 to their early 30s, the dinner itself might become the whole evening. As they get above that 30 number, they don't really want to travel anywhere. They're exhausted on a Friday night, and they will stay as local as possible. People buy a table around 28. Like, there's just fascinating knowledge that you learn when, we've done about 87,000 Shabbat dinners so far. So I've learned a lot about what makes a good dinner party.
You have. So walk me through this.
Sure.
Assume I want to host a Shabbat. What do I do?
Great. So most likely you have been a guest first. The vast majority of our hosts have attended 1, 2, maybe even 5 dinners. Then they'll get a call from Nadav, for example, who will say, hey, Susan, I noticed you've been to a few dinners. Are you ready to try hosting yourself? You may be one of these exceptional people, which sounds like you, Susan, who says, hey, I would love to do this. I know how to do this. Sign me up. Either way, there's a whole intake process. Because we really want to vet you and make sure that you are ready to be warm and welcoming on behalf of OneTable, on behalf of the Federation, on behalf of the community. It doesn't mean that you need to have a high level of Jewish history and knowledge. We can really teach quite a bit.
That's a very important component.
Yeah, we are much more interested in you being warm and kind and welcoming, because you can also engage your friends as guests who may feel ready to lead the kiddush, the blessing over the wine, for example. And you might do it in English the first few times, and you might try different ways of welcoming Shabbat in a way that feels authentic to you. What's most important is the warmth, is the welcoming, is the invitation that we can help you make. So you may have a conversation with one of our staff, like Nadav. There's an online application where you answer a few questions about your own background, share with us a little bit about your hopes and dreams for hosting. We have a welcome call, so you can meet other potential hosts and see, look at you, like how we're sharing this experience, and feel like you're just not alone. I can't emphasize the fact enough that confidence around hosting is not normative here in America.
Right.
So what we are doing is countercultural. So we really do a lot to help you. Once you are approved as a host, you can then post your first dinner. So you go back to the OneTable.org site, you add in your dinner description, you let us know what kind of food you're going to serve. Are you doing this as a potluck? Do you need people to contribute money to help offset?
Well, that's interesting.
Right.
So because not everybody can afford to do this.
Correct. So one of the first things that OneTable learned is that confidence was the first barrier. Then there were tactical barriers, like how do I get the chicken out of the oven on time to have a hot dinner? Like really fundamental hospitality issues that some of us can't remember when we learned, but they needed that help. And some of it is actual the financial resources. So it's a week's worth of groceries to host 10 people for dinner. Not everybody can afford that. So we created nourishment credit. So a host can opt in to getting $10 per guest to offset that cost. We really want to do everything we can to just lower the barrier and help you make it a little bit more special than you would on a weeknight. We know people need Jewish learning resources, so we have audio recordings of blessings, countless videos, online resources, and Nadav and his colleagues are also there as teachers themselves.
The majority of the young Jewish families here, and Jewish couples,
Sure.
Are of interfaith marriage.
Right.
How do you deal with that with your OneTable?
I mean, 71% of couples outside of the Orthodox community across the country are interfaith. So it's not surprising that would be the case here as well. I think Shabbat dinner is an ideal opportunity to showcase the best that Judaism has to offer. It's home-based, it's warm, it's welcoming. As I mentioned before, there's no prior knowledge needed. You do not need to take a class before you celebrate Shabbat. We really don't want you to wait. We want you to do it this coming Friday. If you miss this Friday, you try another Friday. So we are actually, sometimes it's not good enough to just say we're open to everyone. You need to actually be specific in your engagement and outreach. So we may have partnerships specifically with organizations that are designed to be welcoming to interfaith families like 18 Doors or different congregations or communities. But in many cases, it's really just going to the individual host and making sure that the host has, again, their needs. They may be co-hosting with their partner who's not Jewish. Sometimes it's the non-Jewish partner who's the primary host and they bring their guest in. We have heard time and time again from the friends and the partners who are not Jewish that they have felt so welcomed at Shabbat dinner.
That's so important.
What could be more important? So then the same thing needs to go to making sure that we are explicitly and overtly inclusive of LGBTQ young adults. people of color, people from different backgrounds. It was just Mizrahi Heritage Month, and we did a very large, intensive campaign because we want to make sure that the full diversity of the Jewish community feels like OneTable was designed just for them. That's my favorite, when someone says, oh, I thought this was designed for interfaith families, or I thought this was designed for LGBTQ adults, or fill in the blank. That means that other people can see themselves in our branding, in our images, and that they feel empowered to create the community that works for them on equal footing with everybody else.
That's absolutely fantastic. We have to take a break. We'll be right back after this brief message. Next up, we'll meet a local host and attendee of several OneTable dinners. She'll let us know her story and how OneTable helped her reconnect with her faith and her community. That's up next on Mosaic.
I think we learn from each other all the time. And so by us honoring our elders, we're just giving back to those who've given to us. Our seniors have contributed their lifetime to the Federation. It's the young people now giving back to the seniors.
I have been fortunate enough that they hired Catherine.
If you have trouble getting food, she'll help provide food for you. That's a wonderful thing to have.
Joining us now is Ariel Ladner, who's attended and hosted a OneTable dinner. Ariel, welcome to Mosaic.
Thank you, Susan.
I'm so curious, how did you find OneTable?
As Aliza said, I was an attendee of somebody else's OneTable dinner first, and I said, well, I can do this. I'm social, I'm a good host, and then I started doing my own.
How many have you done?
I'm embarrassed to say not as many as I would have liked, but I've done maybe 5 now at this point. And I try to do them all themed around different holidays or secular events even going on.
How does OneTable enrich your Jewish identity?
Well, just by being around other Jewish people, I feel you naturally become more Jewish because you just naturally play Jewish geography or where you went to summer camp, or you talk about your cultural upbringing, and just being around other peers that have shared life experiences enriches your own experience. You say, well, yeah, I know that song, or I know that person, or I went to that camp too. And that kind of just creates a natural shared Jewish experience.
And so how much give and take do you have with the OneTable professional team?
I kind of just get the approval email after I put in my the application to host that week. I don't know if that's the word, but to fill out the paperwork. And then the field managers reach out, and they're, the first couple times I thought, oh, these are form emails. And then I read them a little more and I was like, no, they're actually like sending a personalized email to me. And that was like, oh, this is actually an organization that's close to people's hearts and not just like form emails. And it felt more natural that way too when I was reached out directly.
And what about the connectivity that you find, or with the Shabbat dinners that you're hosting? Is this your place where you're getting most of your spirituality, or? Well,
I think you hit the nail on the head with the generational things you were discussing in the earlier. That a lot of young people, and I'm a millennial, and a lot of us have moved away from organized religion and going to synagogue events. And so we see our spirituality and our religion, and now this is me speaking for an entire generation, so if anyone's listening and doesn't, I should speak for myself, but what I see is us creating our spiritual paths with each other. And again, following that kind of camp model and inclusivity in our college experience, if we were in Jewish sororities or Jewish fraternities, as you said, the younger segment coming right out of college and finding, I don't have a table, but I guess I'll host Shabbat on my fold-out table, and then growing into your 30s and saying, hey, these are friends that have actually come every week, and that feels good. it feels good, and it feels like I don't need to go to synagogue to be religious or spiritual, and I still get to be with people that warm my heart and give me happy experiences.
And I'm sure you're getting that same feedback from most of your friends.
I think so. They like to say that I'm a good organizer, a good host, and I try really hard to, whether it's a Shabbat dinner I'm hosting or I'm at one of my friends and I see somebody that I know is new to the community, and I never want somebody to feel that they, see, I make myself cry because bullying and feeling not a part of something is a terrible feeling.
It is.
And so I walk up and, sometimes I try to make them feel, and in a natural way, of course, you don't want to call that person out for,
Right.
but I want to make them feel you belong here, you're comfortable, let me introduce you to another person. And as the night goes on.
That is beautiful. I love it. What is next for OneTable?
Thank you for asking. We just approved a strategic plan to take us through 2025. And based on what you've seen and heard about our success and growth so far, we have a long way to go. There are about 1.4 million Jewish young adults in the U.S. right now. We've reached about 190,000 of them, but we'd love to be able to do that on an annual basis, right? So in this year, we're probably about 45,000 people participating in OneTable. Could we get to 100,000 annually? Could we do more than that? So that's one goal. That's a really, we're calling building a movement around Shabbat, so that Shabbat and OneTable become ubiquitous. People just know, oh, there's a place I can go on this Friday. I can find the connection I need. The second is enriching the experience. So that means finding greater opportunities to deepen their Jewish connection with others, with their tradition, with a larger community. With rising anti-Semitism, we want to make sure that people have a welcoming and safe place to go, where they can also continue to learn and feel confident about what Judaism does offer, not just the negatives and the defensive posture. And the third is we want to build our own internal capacity as we grow. But connected to those first two are these three offerings for OneTable. The core, which is our challah and butter, which is what Ariel participates in, and those 190,000 people so far. Then there is thinking about powered by OneTable, where we take our technology, our peer engagement methodology, and we start to offer it and even license it to other organizations. We work with Hillels all over the country, 40 different campuses so far, different synagogues you mentioned, and other organizations helping them adopt the same technology, adopt the same approach, so that they can reach way more people themselves. And the third, based on your last question, is called Together at OneTable, which is something we want to test to offer OneTable to adults without children living at home, potentially empty nesters, for example. Probably means mostly people in their 50s and 60s. We want to sort of test it out. Maybe Palm Beach is where we're going to try it.
You can use music anything. I would love to host one. Thank you so much for what you do. And Ariel, I appreciate you coming on air to explain what you're doing, because you're doing something very, very important as well for the community.
My pleasure.
This program is sponsored by Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County.